we'll just jump in. What were you saying about Iowa? Tell me about how you developed or like the setup at Iowa.
Yeah, so at Iowa, like their whole thing is they have their like three words, right? They're like, we're going to be smart, tough, physical, and they go out and they have their vision statement, right? Like they know what they're looking for with people, and then they go and find people that fit that mold, and typically they're undersized people for that position in college football. So they'll go and they'll get like a wide receiver and then try to convert him to tight end, or they'll get a tight end and try to convert him to tackle, even try to convert him to center. They'll take some wide receivers, make them safeties, or make a linebacker a D end by adding weight to them. And that's why that they had such an emphasis on the facility that they had and having access to the food that they had. And that's why it was a little bit of a shift for coming here, where, you know, the kids, the O linemen or D linemen are a little bit bigger and they have to lose weight because that's the type of personnel they wanted here. And then getting speedsters that, you know, also need to gain a little bit of weight, but it was just a complete different shift in philosophy.
Why do they struggle? I don't know. Maybe it's just like the way they pick, but like you're kind of in a vacuum up there in Iowa with regard to like they're the only name in town, right?
Yes.
They're going to be the biggest name in town to attract all the talent they want. Why do you think that's an issue?
An issue?
Yeah, like for example, having undersized guys.
Yeah, just because, you know, you don't get the same exposure to it if you're, you know, everybody in that area would want to go to Iowa versus Iowa State, because back in the day, Iowa State wasn't any good. Now Iowa State actually is good. So that's why you start to see Iowa branching out and getting more and more people. In the last couple of years, Iowa actually has started to get more 4- and 5-star recruits. They're just not going to really tell anybody about it. Their whole pitch is like, oh, we'll develop 2 and 3 stars. But I mean, Tristan Wirfs is a 4-star recruit that was a first-round draft pick for the Bucks. AJ Epinesa, 5-star recruit who should have been a first-round pick, wound up being a second-round pick, but is making an impact in the NFL. They've been very coy, but they are getting more and more talented people. And I think it's just because the nature of college football expanding, and I think it's because of the immediate area getting better. Like I said, Iowa State has forced them to get better. So raising tide rises all ships. So now Iowa has to expand where they used to always stay in Chicago, but now they're, you know, branching out a little bit further, kind of going, stealing some kids from New Jersey. But their ability to take the kids that really want to be there, the local farm-grown kids who are tough, smart, physical, that's all they grew up watching Iowa, because that was the only thing on TV. Because for an 18-year-old kid, all right, 15 years ago when you're watching TV, Iowa State was not good, but Iowa was. So that's helps them.
Who's their main rivalry besides Iowa State?
They have 4 trophy games, and I think that's really cool about it. I think that's something that college football and I think other sports could really just enjoy. Like, there's just something cool about you beat another team and then you go and you get like a trophy that means something to them.
Rub it in their face, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and like in 2014, Iowa didn't win any of them, and then they put a big emphasis on it. And then 2015, we were able to win them all. So Iowa State, they have one, Nebraska, Minnesota, and then Wisconsin. And so like the biggest rival outside of Iowa State most recently has become Nebraska. Iowa and Nebraska don't like each other. It started back when Nebraska and them got paired up as a rivalry, but Nebraska thought they were above Iowa when Nebraska's been delusional for the last couple of years. Minnesota hates Iowa. They have random chants against other teams. They'll be playing like a FCS team in week 1 or 2, and their fans start chanting, "Who hates Iowa? We hate Iowa." It's kind of weird.
That's like in Argentinian soccer or even rugby. They'll be playing, random teams, and they'll be chanting about how Maradona was better than Pele.
Yeah, like it's so weird.
Well,
was he, Fernando?
Well, it's debatable. But now it's a different discussion, and it's always like, I thought you were going to say something different. I bet like it's always against, Argentina against England because of some like warfare and stuff that has nothing to do with sport.
And that's
I think that's what we like,
with Iowa, and then the other one, Wisconsin, that's just like a mutual respect because Wisconsin's like really good, right? And it's like if whoever wins that game usually is going to be the team that wins the West. And then there's history between Iowa and Wisconsin with one of the former assistant coaches who was at Iowa. Then, you know, when Bielema got the job at Wisconsin, he able to turn them around kind of by doing what happened at Iowa: tough, smart, physical, finding the right people, knowing what you want, and then turning them into what they are now. So like those are their 4 big rivalries. Iowa State, you always got to beat, and then you respect Wisconsin. Minnesota is just annoying, like, and then Nebraska.
They seem to be, you know, a couple of years ago, they had a really good year. I think they were like top 10.
Yeah, they and then, but like again, they went to Iowa, they lost. Like, there's just something about, like, you know, they know Florida Rosedale's on the line, so like they want to get the pig, and it's really fun, and it's something that when I came here, like, you wish you'd like to see it more. I feel like it's really just predominant in the Big Ten that they have it, right? Like Minnesota and Wisconsin play for a giant axe. Like, that's cool.
Yeah. What's your rivalry game at Towson?
Delaware. Towson and Delaware. Yeah. And like, so Delaware, that's one thing too. We don't have, like, Delaware's got tons of money, tons of resources, and we're expected to beat them every year, even though they're perennial FCS champs. They have all the things, but they're our rival because we share a border with them, you know, and have had a winning record against them in the last couple of years, luckily.
So, I mean, you're from Massachusetts. How did you end up in Iowa? I know we've probably spoken about this, but I've forgotten the story.
So the quick version is, when I was at Harvard, the guy that's the director at Harvard, he was a former assistant at Iowa, and he got me there. The little bit longer version is, for my master's degree, I needed to intern somewhere. That my advisor told me to go to Harvard because I'd get a better experience because of how well the guy James Frazier there runs things. And then he got me the internship at Iowa. I was there for a summer. That led to a full-time position with the Maryland Terrapin football team for 2 years. Then one of the guys on Iowa's staff left to go be the head guy at Eastern Washington. And then I got a call at the end of the 2013 season, and that's how I wound up there.
I'm just checking these names of the schools off the Rabdo bingo card.
Yeah, they had that happen.
Is that when you were there?
No, that happened before me. I think it was 2020 or 2011. You know, and a lot of people, like, other places, have told me that they had done a similar program, a 10 sets of 10 or a 100 reps, least amount of sets possible. Well,
I coached a kid who was he was a transfer from Maryland post Jordan McNair.
Oh.
And you know how we trained, like, and especially, like, this guy was a safety, he's like special teams guy, so we were like tons of alactic work, high quality, tons of rest like that. And he's like walking around like a Baptist church revival, like, oh my God, I feel so good. And, you know, he told us, like, he got rhabdo. Really? And yeah, you know, it was the Jordan McNair part was what came out. There was way more kids that, you know, got rhabdo, dehydration, ended up in the hospital, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and that to what happened at Iowa, what they really did too is they flipped it on. That's kind of what they use that as, like, the obstacles, the way kind of to. That's when the next year they got GPS units to monitor how much is going on. They got HRV units with athlete, so that way they can see how recovered the athletes are. They kind of use that to make sure that something like that would never happen again.
So the workout in question, was it 10 by 10 back squat, but then there was prowler pushes in between?
I don't know. That was, again, like, the word you never really said over there. Really? Like, you didn't bring it up, but it might have been, I'm assuming it was from a GPP afterwards, right? So in the beginning of their phases, it was a 10 by 10, 50% on the bar. And then GPP being, you know, sled pushes at the back half of it, because a lot of the times, you know, the GPP would be non-running stuff. I disagree with. I think you can run during your, you know, general physical preparation period in the beginning.
Well, you're getting in shape to do the things.
Yeah, like, they were just getting in shape, and that, like, then they super investigated, like, you know, some of the kids were taking Adderall, and, like, how does that affect it? And so it became this really massive thing, and it was completely just. I really didn't talk about it. Like, it kind of got brought up every now and again, you know, because the coaches on staff knew what was going on, and they were always like, oh, well, we've done this before. And it's like, okay, but is that actually the best thing for it? You know, like, Could you do other things? Yes, no. I mean, that's neither.
So, I mean, Chris Doyle, I'm not going to put you in a position here, but like, there are those negative things because of his profile.
Yeah.
There are those negative things associated with his name, rightly or wrongly. Mm-hmm. But you become the highest paid strength coach in the industry, presumably for a reason, at least in part. And success leaves clues. You hang around that long. What are the biggest things that you took away positively in that regard?
Just adding value, and not being the quote unquote strength coach. And I think you've kind of done a really good job, you both, with educating strength coaches of, not being that meathead. It was never about, like, he always used to tell us, like, you got to dress for the position that you want. So he never believed in wearing the tight medium shirts or anything. Like, if the coordinator's dressed a certain way, offense and defensive coordinator, like, you should dress and present yourself the exact same way on a game day.
Because I remember I think the first time we met, you told me, like, hey, if the head coach drops dead, he's the head coach.
He's the head coach. Yeah. And like, they had formed a relationship of trust, and he understood, like, Commander's intent and the vision statement of what, Coach Ferentz wanted, and had been around Coach Ferentz for so long, and had truly been, he was the strength and conditioning coordinator. And that was something that I think, makes a lot of sense. Like, you have your offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator. Now he's your strength and conditioning coordinator. And the organization that he had from top to bottom, and I've heard DeMarco talk about this before, but he was very good at making sure we all had the same language. So when we were teaching something to an athlete, whether it was a brand new athlete or not, they were being taught the exact same progression for a movement, so that athlete, would understand what was being taught, whether it was the right exercise or not. That athlete was used the same terminology, and I got ripped if I didn't use the exact terminology, and those were never fun. Like, yes, the training atmosphere was high. The standard was high. And that was like the biggest clue of how to run an organization with systems, and to, how to make things run automatively. Like, okay, you're in charge of this and you're in charge of that, but then also making sure that there were levels behind it. Okay, I'm in charge of GPS, but Cody, you're the backup. So if he got hit by a bus, the system can keep running, and you're in charge of this, but you're the backup to make sure that everything can keep running. And he was also really good about if something happened with your family. Like, he was really understanding with any of that. Like, my father's father passed away, and I was like, hey, I'd like to go home. He's like, do whatever you need to do. We will be fine. He was super understanding anytime things like that happened. But just how to add value, overall, not just, in the weight room or on the field, how to add value to the whole program, and how to, like you said, he was the highest paid for a reason, because he was able to continue to bring something that the head coach agreed with and wanted the ability to, guys did get bigger, stronger, faster when they were there.
When, presumably to evolve like that over like 20 plus years, you have to have that. You have to have a degree of self-reflection and insight. How would you, I'm just curious, how do you reconcile that with 20 plus years in the game doing the 10x10 plus sled pushes that results in overuse like that? Just a blind spot? Or?
Yeah, like almost, because at the same time, like, yes, there would be times where, you almost do the same program with minor changes. I guess it could just be that dichotomy of, hey, this got the guys tougher, that vague word of, it's not an easy training session to do, but we've done it before, and guys have been able to push through this before, and that's how you've been able to develop that edge of, you do 10 reps, you take a breather, you do 10 more, and then keeping it a lower body day. Probably also just not having enough protein for them to recover, or any, like, because the supplement game has gotten completely evolved. But yeah, I don't think it's it doesn't make, I guess, again, hindsight 2020, you realize well, could have done something completely different.
You only get points for saying beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, Well, again, it's probably just that dichotomy, right? Like, okay, like we can be really cutting edge, but at the end of the day, like, hey, this. We've done this before, having a powerlifting background or whatever you want to call it. Like I said, I wasn't there for that, and I never saw it again because the incident happened before me. But I guess that would be just the only reflection of like, hey, this is how we're gonna set the tone of having a difficult off season.
Now you're in year 4 or 5 at Towson.
4.
I always think, when you're in an assistant type position, like you said, you take the good, you think, right, I'm going to keep this, but then there are things that you're going to, as being your own man, it should be that you think, right, when I'm wearing the big boy pants, I'm going to change this.
Yeah,
this,
and you
this.
do that all the time when you're an assistant.
Yeah. Well, no, the bad assistants don't. The bad assistants just copy and paste and change the logo.
Yes.
But what are those things that you coming into Towson were like, here's what I'm going to do differently? And then over those 4 or 5 years, is there some that you've kept, doubled down on, or rejected?
I think the things that I definitely doubled down on was just the ability to put systems in place. There was I knew that I needed to get a system in place because when I got here, there was no structured lift group times. The athletes used to come in whenever they wanted. The athletes didn't know how to pair exercises. They never had paired exercises before. There was no relationship with athletic training. There was no relationship with sports nutrition. There was no relationship with academics. So I really doubled down on that. And he also talked to us about his biggest mistake when he got to Wisconsin, when he worked there, was he didn't take the time to form relationships with the coaches when he first got there. He just started to go to work and start programming for the athletes. Yeah. So he told us hey, you got to form relationships when you first get there. So I really doubled down on that, making sure that we had systems in place and then continued to evolve that. I probably, to my own fault, made things somewhat similar at first because it's what I knew. I had one assistant at the time, and I was told hey, you have 3 days of lifting in the weight room, 1 hour for 3 groups, and you have 2 groups on Tuesday, Thursday for 1 hour on the field. I was like, I have 5 hours to train these football athletes. Wow. So how do I, continue the framework of, okay, we're going to do a kettlebell complex with stride on our GPP initial phase, or we're going to keep movements very simple. I'm going to just do a hang power clean. I'm not going to go to the floor. I kept that structure very similar. In the years since I've progressed, I feel like I've done a better job of the long-term athletic development with the super young kids. I had never heard about the 1x20 program until I learned it from you guys. How impactful that can be, especially for a novice athlete, and then how to actually evolve your refined and highest level athlete with some of the French contrast stuff, or with the oscillating advantageous positions, utilizing cluster sets better. I didn't think it was great. The way that we use bands for speed squats, I think they're a little bit too heavy and not hitting the stimulus that we wanted. That was something that I always was keenly aware of, and I think I do a better job of it now. Really doubling down once I learned more about it, of how important it is to be on the field, to do more and more work, especially leading up to camp, because that was one thing that I didn't think I talked about as much. And the fact that there's 8 hours to get ready for 20, and you got to spend time on the field to get ready for that. And if you don't, you're just completely missing the mark. That was something that I never thought was talked about at Iowa. It's something that I don't think enough strength coaches talk about, and how you really have to prioritize that to get them ready. Yes, we all know that speed, you got to increase max output and sprinting, and whether people believe in Nordics or not, or a super maximal RDL, whatever it is. But if you're also not giving them that exposure to all that chronic low level middle running that they're going to do in camp, you're going to be susceptible to injury.
That's what Fernando, you want to tell him, with the volume you talked about, you were just building in intervals just to make them robust to that, right?
Yeah, well, that's how it worked. And as Coach Lima was talking about that, I was just looking at his shirt, saying he's wearing the
it's the first day of the month.
the right shirt. Yeah. It's like you said, like especially coming out of the lockdown we had, which was ridiculous. It was so slow, the build up to actually tolerate that output for build ups, and then it took us like months. But of course, we were like regress from like below 0 point, below starting point. But it's like you said, just getting slow touch of that high output, and then just building the volume on different stuff like tempo and stuff around it till they actually could like just let loose and just go crazy with their speed. But slow process, right?
And I think that's also what I've done a better job here too of, is like having, how can you have differences amongst your training ages without it being too overly complex, but still being able to get stimuluses that you need. Like something that I learned from Will Greenberg when we were having a conversation, it could be something as simple as like, if a guy needs, if he's already at his correct body weight and he needs to get stronger, you can manipulate the sets and reps. Or if he's a guy that needs more, he's a, in the off season, if he needs to add more lean body mass, you can again manipulate the sets and reps, and that's an easy tweak. Or, not forcing a square peg in a round hole. Like at Iowa, I think we would force a square peg in a round hole. Like, does a kid need a hang power clean if he's a transfer running back who doesn't have great wrist mobility and he's here for 1 year? Absolutely not. Do I make
it's like
here? Absolutely not. Like we can do it. And if we're going to do if the rest of the team's doing a hang power clean, he'll do a counter movement jump with the pitch arc, the belt around his waist. If we're doing it, a clean or a power clean, okay, he's just going to start with a static start in the bottom. How can I keep B as much as A? And I'm not forcing square pegs into round holes. Like my quarterbacks, like, guys, this is the program. Do you want to do it the Olympic lift? Do you want to do a box jump? Like, what do you want to do? And I'm way more giving than it was there. I think that's just my personality, because at the end of the day, I just want them on the field. I've learned that a lot from you guys in Strength Coach, that were like, come up with your why. What's your vision statement? And my staff can reiterate it at any point. I want to be the leader in player availability for practices and games in our conference and nationally. I want to be on the field. And if the quarterbacks, if some of them, if this, like, that's the thing too. I'm not even going to make a quarterback card. If some of them want to bench press with a regular bar and they want to bring their grip in, great. Some of them want to do Swiss bar, great. If you want to do dumbbell bench, great. I don't care. We're doing a horizontal press. Whatever one works best for you, awesome. All right, the kickers, same thing. What works best for you? How can I keep the main thing the main thing?
If the body is not clever enough to tell the difference between a migraine and brain cancer, it's not going to be like, this isn't a straight barbell.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's at the end of the day, like, I want you guys on the field, and I've finally got it through to the guys too. Like, you're not a good lineman because you can hang power clean 315. You're a good lineman because you can block somebody in front of you. I'll never forget I forget who you said it about, but they thought a power clean was an aggressive cleaning of the house, right? Like,
yeah. Well, it's like we always kind of say, I don't want to use the word philosophy, but you sort of leave yourself some wiggle room, and you just go principle first, method later. You just want something powerful, and some guy maybe needs a bit more weight to move, like maybe not as quick because he's not your sprinter, but he needs power in a different range with the force velocity curve. And then what I did is I had like very similar physical profiles, but they're all at different places and training ages. How do I do that? Just they don't race when they do speed. I'm just go by sensations. I just said, like, feel like you press gas but not all the way, and for all of them it just means different. And you will get the stimulus you wanted, but they'll just self-adjust to what you want. And, it's just that wiggle room and saying, like, hey, do something powerful with kind of some weight. It could be a jump. It could be a clean. It could be a drop. I don't know. But it's funny to hear similar ways of thinking in completely different sports in completely different parts of the world. Yeah. I also build up to that French contrast, and it's just expression of speed and power. That's what the end.
Super lucky too, though, because being at Iowa and being able to work with smart people. You guys talk to Nick all the time, but Joel, who's out at Central Michigan, we had access to a lot of technology, so we would do jumps with a tendo around our waist and see, like, okay, this box height with this weight is similar bar speed, so we're getting the same output. I talked about it before we recorded, but like, I don't have the same wide net of like, oh, we can take whoever we want. Like, I got a kid who's got a leg length discrepancy. Do I need to shove a square peg in a round hole? No. We have kids that, a kid had such a bad arthritic knee and complete like knee surgery. He has a cadaver's meniscus in his leg. Like, do I need to train him the exact same way as everybody else? No. Like, if some of our linemen who came in with prior surgeries or their scapula doesn't move well with their humerus, but that's what, like, when we allow their scap to move freely in a press, their anterior shoulder pain goes away. Well, guess what? I'm not going to lock you in on a bench. Like, we can find ways around it. And it is about the principle being first. And I think that's what they like about it is we're not shoving a square peg in a round hole, but it wouldn't be able to happen if our two assistants hadn't got as good as they got. And then one of our volunteers who's a student here has really stepped his game up. So the four of us have really been able to make it happen.
And maybe it doesn't sound that sexy, but in my head, it's just sometimes saying at some point of this week, I want you to do something quick. I want you to push something heavy. I want you to lift something heavy and just move this way. And whatever that looks like could change, but it's just the principle of saying we need this sort of like you said about the migraine, the brain cancer, like it has to feel this way, whether we just pick a dumbbell, bar, or whatnot that you are used to, and you can generate stimulus. That's what it is, right? Generate stimulus and adaptation.
Yeah, like perfect example we had on Monday. So we'll mainly do our upper body, lower CNS lift on Monday to let them, we're moving them. They enjoy that lift. They enjoy doing that stimulus on a Monday rather than doing a lower body stuff on Monday because they're still recovering from the game. And we'll do a dynamic effort bench followed by a maximum effort bench, keeping the accommodating resistance on for our refined plus athletes. And some of my quarterbacks, they did do a straight chain barbell bench. Some of them wanted to do the Swiss bar. Some of them did dumbbells with a band for accommodating resistance. Then when it was time to go to the heavier version, some of them kept the barbell with the chains. Some of them went to two board with the Swiss bar. Like, we moved something fast, we moved something heavy, and then we did a little bit of, repetition effort within that micro day. And then we'll wind up switching phases next week just because camp ended, all the stress of school starts, and we planned it that way. So it wasn't everything just getting thrown at them at once. This was something familiar. They knew what was going on. But like I said, those quarterbacks, they did completely different things.
It's the same way as like managing coaches. Like I have been in that environment where one person writes the program and you go out and you like coach it as is to the letter. And if you don't, we're going to have a conversation about it. Whereas like, I feel like when you give that autonomy to people to make certain decisions that they should be qualified to make, they feel a bit more ownership and empowerment. And it's like, I always tried to be prescriptive in the outcome and then hands off in the process that you achieve to meet that outcome. Because
that's another thing that I learned, to do better at than at Iowa, because like I said, I got ripped for not saying the exact words, and that's how things were supposed to be there. But for me, it's like, hey guys, my two assistants, you have a different personality than me. This is the commander's intent. We want them to move something fast and move something heavy. Like, if you see something that doesn't look right and they want to do something different, change it. Just tell me. So then that way we can prescribe that thing for them moving forward. Use your relationship with them, talk to them, see how they're feeling. So that way you guys can give me more input. And at the end of the day, like, that's how, we were doing reconditioning on the bike, and a couple guys didn't get the same amount of calories, because that's how we'll track how much the output is when they're on the bike. We were like, hey, get 10 calories in a minute. Like, that keeps the RPM right around 60 or 57. And the guy didn't. And he, like, one of my assistants, he was able to bust his chops and get him to keep doing what he was supposed to do rather than, just coming down and ripping on. Like, no, that doesn't need to be done. Like, do it the way, give you the autonomy, give you the mastery, give you the purpose. I tell my, two assistants, I use the 4 Ps. Like, I can't affect your pay. I don't have that ability, but I'm going to do my best to take care of your personal life, give you a career progression, and make you feel like you're a part of this team. Like, what movement, like, they're like, hey, I think we should change this. Awesome. Change. Like, if you really,
also you're exposing yourself on the upside to the occasions where they run an experiment and they do it better than you.
Yes.
Because then you can take that and absorb that, and it's like you have to open yourself up to the upside.
Yeah, and you do want to prepare people just to be kind of robust, so where something changes, something's unpredictable, there's not a massive shift in their performance. In sevens, we might go, I'll say this again and again, we've never had two same seasons because say you go to the same place for a reason, but it's not the same gym, it's not the same elements. So if my player only knows how to bench press, I'm just going to put like an extreme example, but with a bar, and when he uses dumbbells, he cannot adjust the sensation of the weight, and he just feels really sore about using a different range. Then I just made this minor change and this huge effect. Then that's one of the things I'm failing to prepare them for. Like they just need to be able to push either if it's like a bench press or dumbbell press or a weighted push-up. It has to make no difference on his soreness and adaptability on the next day.
You're advocating for CrossFit for rugby. Brilliant.
but here's the other thing. No. Like I had to take into account COVID and all that other stuff. Like, what if I got put into quarantine and like I wasn't able to be there? I'm not going to be the coach that's like, okay, guys, let me lead this workout on the phone.
Fuck that,
like,
dude.
My assistants are in charge. Like, I wanted to get the players, seeing them lead. Like, so we have a turf room that was turned into a weight room. We have a weight room and then the field, whether it was speed work or conditioning. So there's three of us. We all just rotated where we were. So the players saw a coach leading. It didn't matter if it was me or them. They knew, hey, if something happened and I had to get quarantined, they could lead them. But the other part, like I said about taking care of their 4 Ps, I let them go and do the things that they need to do if there's a wedding or whatnot, because I know the same thing has to happen for me. If my family needs me, if my wife needs me to take care of the kids and I have to put them on the bus, I'm not going to be like, oh, lifts canceled, guys. Like, no,
that's one thing
we're going to take it. Like
I learned, it was a book by about Jeff Bezos, and I read it. This is like 4 or 5 years ago when I was in Japan. But one of the things that he talks about is always be trying to put yourself out of business.
Yes.
And
yourself out of the job.
When you start out in your career or when you first get that head job, you almost want the ego fluff of, if I wasn't to turn up tomorrow, this place would fall apart. And that can help. That can say, yes, you are important, but you're ultimately serving the organization and the athletes on a higher level, where if you didn't turn up tomorrow, things would turn over exactly the same because you got people that can fill that gap for you. And more importantly, it means if you can do that, you've bought yourself the opportunity and freed yourself up to work on the higher level stuff that only you can do.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Like it's allowed us these different levels of coaching, right? Like I have the different levels of training maturity, but you know, my volunteer Carson, all right, we have 2 other volunteers. So like they take care of the in the weeds stuff. Like, okay, is the room set up so we can have efficient flow through the room? And then my other 2 assistants, Zach and Kyle, they're looking, okay, I'm in the turf room today. Are these movements the right things that we should be doing still? And then is this the appropriate, like, are we doing the right thing? And they're coming back to me like, we should change this, we should not change that. I'm stepping back from even a further view. And I'm like, okay, we have these different levels of maturity. This is where Rob wants us to go with the practice plan. And it's a bigger week. So is the stimulus appropriate? What are any modifications I need to make from anybody that has limitations in practice? Is everybody showing up on time? Like some of the things that, I can have the different detached view, and I'm not like, okay, we're putting the chains on the bar. Now that's not to think that that's not important or that it's below me, because you do that from time to time, but it also gives me the opportunity to say, hey, you know, my assistants, they can run rooms. They can fully do all the things that they need to do when they need to get assistant jobs or GA jobs in the case of Carson, because, hey, they've done it. They've handled the smaller responsibilities. Now, okay, in the process of doing that, when we're at practice and there's nobody to recondition, hey, now we're talking bigger picture. This is how you communicate with coaches. And this is the reasoning behind the way that we do these exercises on this day. It does just allow for all that, the detached levels. And like you said, it does make them feel like they have a greater piece of the pie and they're not just my assistants.
So it's kind of like you evolved from that guy that carries, you know, drives around the day by day. And as you evolve, yes, they wouldn't miss out if you failed just showing up one day, but you are the guy that could continuously take them to the next step. So a week will be fine, but if you have that 5-year, 10-year plan, you are the guy that with the mindset and the, you know-how to make them evolve. Like you can miss out on a week or a month and they'll be fine, but the next steps of evolution will have to carry like your presence or your ideas because you have that big picture. That
I think is that full dichotomy in the balance, because yes, you don't want to, you know, you don't need to, but I think we would all say that the nuance and how good you can be as a coach is your ability to relate to them. And then that ability to help, you know, if they like you a little bit more, then maybe they get that little bit more out of the lift, or your ability to just connect in that presence in the room when you're with them. If you can get a little bit more out of them from that relationship piece, you know, it's both edges. Like, yeah, you don't need to be there every day for they can do it, but how can you then still, we all know that the subtlety, and I think Boyle said it before, like, hey, you can have my program. The difference is my ability to coach it better than you. So
I always tell people, like, you can walk through Ramsey's kitchen and watch him cook the food. It doesn't mean you're going to open a restaurant tomorrow.
Well, Keir, that's a perfect example that what happened to you after the World Cup that year. So you just gave them a full program. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's true, because I was there for the aftermath. You just gave them a program that was a build-up of like 3 or 4 months to a World Cup. And everyone knew that program by heart, you know, the blocks, the evolution. And then they said, oh, Keir, we don't really need you that much because now we know everything you know. And then they turn up for like a full Super Rugby season, and they just have 3 months of a program to build up to the comp.
Completely different
And
circumstances.
then after week 1 goes by, they'll be like, oh, what do we do now? Oh, just we recycle the program. It's like, that's not the reason. You just copy the program that was thought for a month, and you try to replicate in 9 months, and you get 56 injuries. And you come up 16 out of 18.
They got to understand that your room, like anybody listening to this, your training program is predicated, first of all, on 2 things: the room you have and the athletes you have. Like, then you can figure it out. Like, if you go into a job interview, like, this is what I'm doing day 1, like, do you like,
you show up with a program?
Yeah, it's like, okay, like, there was 8 jammers and 8 neck machines at Iowa.
I fucking hate jammers, dude.
Exactly. We don't have 8 jammers, but like, I was watching when I was interning, guys were like, yeah, I'm gonna use. It's like, dude, you don't have jammers. What are you gonna do? Like,
The world's most expensive clothes rack. Give me the your PhD thesis in a nutshell.
individualized force velocity profiling to affect drop jump performance. So look at their drop jump. Are they getting off the ground slow? Are they getting off the ground fast? What is their imbalance? What do they need to train more? Give them some specific training before they did their normal team training. See if that works better than the control group. So the control group didn't do any individualized stuff before their training. They just went through the normal group training, and we wanted to see, does individualized force training for somebody who's already fast off the ground, getting them even more powerful in that short amount of time, versus somebody who is slow off the ground. All right, let's improve their ability to get off the ground faster, improve their dynamic strength, or just, you know, your normal training. And we found that the control group was just as good as everybody else because of the normal training that everybody else went through, right? We were going through, everybody on the team was lifting, you know, 80% or plus 1 rep max in their major movements. Everybody on the field was sprinting body weight stuff. So they were getting exposures to high force and high velocity. So at you know, the P value, there was no statistically significant difference when you only did it before training. So
you think that's a reflection of training age?
I do think it's a reflection of training age, because even with like, I say my refined lifters, but let's say it's somebody that's only really been training for 4 or 5 years. How really advanced is that?
Yeah.
And I also think it's a result of training age. And I think it's a result of just the fact that laying into the training age is the fact that you're getting that exposure to high speed stuff and high force stuff. So because you are still so novice, it's not going to make much of a difference. The idea would then be to run it again, but make it where it's like, okay, you're a velocity deficient. You're pretty much not going to do anything that is heavy strength training. And it's just going to be all ballistic speed work, tendo everything. And then the opposite for the force group. And then the control group, hey, you're just going to do the normal training that we had already prescribed.
Do you have to pay Matt Ray a commission for that?
No, I don't. And yeah, like the study that so there was a study that we used as our as kind of like the backbone from, forget, like Samazio and Jimenez Reyes. That's like, and they did something similar. And I want to run it longer, with these football athletes. We're in the process waiting on an IRB to get back to us. We're going to do a different study on single leg stability and vertical jump performance, while also looking at their sleep, nutrition, and hydration in season for athletes. But then we would want to run a different research in 2020 about what I had just said, like taking the RSI study and my dissertation study another level. But with COVID and then seasons being canceled, like we prioritized and pushed that to the back burner.
Interesting. I that was one thing that came up recently on SCN. I think it was talking about like digging a layer deeper of like, this guy has a really high RSI, but then starting to put people into quadrants. Like it's a high RSI fed by either short contact or, high jump, or is it a low because of low contact or low jump? You have that quadrant. It can't be your shit of both, but like trying to understand those different needs and as you said, it may not be necessary.
No, and that's the thing too, and like that's what I've been trying to tell. I told some of my colleagues, at like smaller schools that have even less access to things like, I'm like, don't just train them, like, because you're getting even less advanced or less high training age athletes. Like I have a freshman, he's now a redshirt freshman. His vertical jump, so his KPI has gone up 8 inches, and he did a 1x20 program.
It's fucking nuts, dude.
In this, this summer. So June and July was the first time he went on to truly like, okay, pairing exercises and, in the next level of training maturity. And it went, like, again, we did nothing like the article that I wrote, we went through the exact same progression with him, and he, other kids going like a fullback going up 6-7 inches, like on stuff where it's like, it works. Like if your KPIs continue to go up, like I had a thrower, and so it like works across both genders. Thrower, she got second place in the league. Is
that the Nigerian chick? She's a beast.
No, so that she did 1x20 when we first got back from COVID, because like everybody just had such a low training maturity, but she was a 6-year senior. Yeah. But this girl was a true freshman, and she got second in shot and second in javelin, and her training program was 1x20. Like,
and that's athletic as well to go between the two, like shot and javelin.
Yes.
Like normally you see like interchange between, say, shot and discus, but those two are so different.
No, she's a very good athlete, and she's going to force me to grow to get better with that. But she still needed to get better at her basic movement patterns, like her pelvic movement when we would do either bilateral or unilateral pushing. It's still like we needed to work on that. And then when we worked on her single leg stability with her hinge pattern, like we needed a clean, like, so just using that time to teach neural learning and don't get bored with it, because now look what's continuing to happen. She set freshman records here, and we kept it very simple. And I said, look, you have that ability to continue to have stimulus over the course of your career. You're going to be here with me for 3 more years. We can now keep taking you to that next level. And so, like I said, it's worked, and that's why I've continued to do it, and that's why we measure and do the things that we do.
Dude, if you saw our quickest player and the way he trains, you'd be like, what? He's not doing anything special. He can run like 38.6 kilometers per hour, 21 years old.
Put it in miles per hour for him. It's like 23 plus miles an hour. It's fast.
I can't do the conversion. Use the normal metric system, please.
Yes.
This is true. It's a lot easier, the metric system.
Unfortunately, America rules the world. Now, to wind up, where can people follow you on social media to be inundated with calls to join Strength Coach Network, Dr. Lima?
Instagram, it would be at coach.j.lima, and then Twitter, it would be the almost exact same. So at coach_j_lima. And
they can also check out, you got articles up on Strength Coach Network blog.
Articles on Strength Coach Network in the blog. Learn about how to run a high performance model. Learn about Olympic weightlifting with a 1x20 approach that turned a lot of heads, and a lot of people were not pleasant, but I enjoyed that because, again, it's worked.
Haters everywhere, my brother.
Haters gonna hate, right?
Sweet.
And